Yeah. So we started the event with Google, and we're ending the day with Google.
One of three.
What can we say? So I wanted to dive right in. This idea of nirvana is just to follow the customer journey. If there's one company that has access, there's maybe a couple of other companies, Apple and Facebook, that are in that category, but people are signed in on Gmail accounts throughout the day on the desktop and on their iPhone. On their Android occasionally.
They're platform agnostic from an advertising standpoint.
There you go. From the advertising, so you're representing the advertising side, so you are agnostic. You're doing increasingly amount of stuff offline as well and trying to reach people. You've got the calling, but and I'm sure you've got to play an Internet of Things. I mean, you've just got a number of activities going. So I wanted to go through where the challenges are now that we supposedly have all this technology. It just seems like what we keep hearing is there's all this pain. That it's still a broken experience because you've got the mobile screen. It's very small, and people are trying to figure out how to get the right messaging and the right location to you. So it's still very broken in some ways. And one thing struck me from the morning session when I was sitting backstage with Jason Sparrow of Google, who was at AdMob and sold for $650 million to Google and was one of the biggest, earliest ad plays. He was sitting there looking at the sponsors and partners of MobileBeat, and he said, "I don't recognize half of these." And it felt like we were in this era of this huge consolidation a few years ago, but now we're seeing this proliferation of all these companies again. So something's clearly not solved, right? So let's go to the first question. We were prepping off earlier in the event. Attribution. I wanted to talk to. Let's go to you first, Eyal, because we were hearing from you about the problems with messaging and some of the other challenges you have. But we've seen a player has offers kicked out of Facebook's partnership program, and you just got a lot of jostling around things with this attribution question. Can you talk about the emerging standard and what is the emerging standard for attribution for companies today, and what can we do to make sure that works for people?
Well, I guess there's many layers of attribution,
yeah.
And what we see today is a clear attribution problem which spans across different platforms because there's no the common denominator between the various platforms that are out there is the actual consumer. It's the customer, and he's basically at one point using a laptop, using Google for searches, and then using a Hybris system for an e-commerce purchase. Then he's using his mobile device for something else, basically looking at an app and so on and so forth. And I can give you a couple of examples of clear attribution problems for pretty large companies which are not solved. So there's no real standard today for attribution. There's a lot of attempts to create attribution. For example, we saw a player today in the Innovation Showdown which is addressing the app attribution problem. So how do you actually generate foot traffic using apps, and how do you measure the lift due to this? So I don't think there's a real golden standard today for attribution, but there's definitely a lot of attempts which are out there to actually track down the consumer in the various stages of the customer journey of the consumer, and there's a lot of tricks that companies are trying to deploy. For example, cookies don't work on mobile.
Brendon, what do you think about attribution?
Well, I mean, I think from an attribution standpoint, I think you can almost have two different camps of types of customers. If you're an app-only company, then I think attribution is a little easier. If you are a multi-screen, if you have a multi-platform business, if you have physical locations, things of that nature, then the attribution piece does get far more difficult. I would say from like a direct marketing standpoint, whether it's search or display or affiliate or any type of media buying over the last, or customer acquisition, has been fairly linear. And you buy a keyword, you buy display, you buy email, and you drive to traffic and you try and convert that person on the landing page. In mobile, you get a proliferation of activities from device to device and going into store, like Place talked about, and you have to start thinking about the totality of those events and how they all fit together to think about attribution. And that's where I don't think as a business, as an ecosystem, we've solved that. And that may be why you also see a lot of proliferation of a lot of different companies in the space, is that there is a massive opportunity to start to provide some of those tools. I will say that you can do that today, right? Placed has a solution. Twitter and Facebook and any number of other companies, including these guys, have solutions to help you on that front. But the customer typically has not caught up to that moment. And we were talking about this backstage where there is more than enough evidence to support that this behavior is going on, that there's an inflection in usage that should dictate that people are thinking differently about attribution, but it hasn't necessarily caught up. So that is the challenge that we face as an organization and that we want to push the ecosystem at large to try and solve.
Great. You're mostly focused on the back end, right, Ariel, in terms of large customers there. Can you talk a little bit about the management challenge? I'm sure a lot of these companies here are dealing with the challenge of having to confront this new world, right? Things like attribution, measuring lifetime value of customers. Can you talk a little bit about how management has been structured traditionally, and are they making the change appropriately? What are the things that you're seeing there?
Well, one thing is that you have to start combining these channels. So customers like ours, like Starbucks or Levi's or Oakley's or Granger's, all these large enterprises, they have many different ways how customers interact with them. So what they need behind the channel, I don't think attribution can be solved in a channel-specific way. That's actually more a back-office thing. So you need a single source of truth, the golden record for product data, for customer data, for order data, product availability, and so on. But beyond the old-styled, old-fashioned customer profile, with just structured data, you have to add context around the customer, maybe even user-generated content around this. And that there's a need for a new system that can actually manage structured and unstructured data around these business objects, customer, product, order, and so on. And that's what platform players like us or SAP is actually providing, because the mobile channel cannot live alone, isolated, like e-commerce was in the past. I'm old enough to remember the e-commerce times where the e-commerce teams were totally decoupled from the stores or the print catalog teams in large enterprises. And I see a little bit that this is happening now on the mobile side. The mobile teams are going off doing something really cool, but they don't use the context, all the information, the processes that actually the enterprise can provide. So they only see the channel-specific information of their customer, but not the whole customer journey. And that's why these more back-office-oriented integration platforms are being needed.
Like as an example of that, one of the things, and I think you heard from Jason talking about click-to-call, of the ways that you can convert and have transactions be consummated, whether it's cross-device or in-store. Calls is a big one. We've talked to some big customers that actually, from either a desktop standpoint or a mobile standpoint, hide the number because the call center business doesn't map back to the e-commerce guys. And so they want to drive and maximize as much volume e-commerce. And they're saying, hey, we don't want to drive calls, but it is a way to consummate a transaction. And that's an organizational thing that has to change. That is, I think, representative sometimes of that siloed structure, the siloed nature of how organizations think.
Yeah, and I think at Men's Warehouse, Susan Neal we heard last night that she's actually responsible for marketing and technology and representing both sides of the house to make sure that those are compatible. Brandon, you guys have spent a lot of time educating in the marketplace. What do you see as the single biggest place where people need to be educated on their opportunities to?
I do think, we talk about, we've mentioned it here, measurement and attribution, but I think there's just a sense of urgency. Yeah. Again, talking backstage, I was referencing, I think, a customer that has greater than 75% of their traffic now on mobile. We look at it from a search query standpoint. There's an inflection that either has happened or will happen. And when that happens is that, for a multi-channel business, a multi-screen business, that you can't necessarily just apply what you've done in digital and shoehorn that into mobile and say, now I've got this multi-screen thing figured out. You are now really more of a mobile business. So there's a sense of urgency. But then where I think things start to break down is that over the last 10 or 15 years, again, we've gotten so good at understanding ROI, whether it's your cost per acquisition, return on ad spend, things of that nature, that they sometimes get paralyzed. If I apply that same metric to mobile, it may not work the same way because we have a forked transaction being consummated via calls, via in-store, via cross-device. And so you have to start changing that institutionally. So I think there's a sense of urgency and action and really just change behavior that needs to happen within businesses. Now that's different if you're, again, an app-specific business versus a more multi-screen kind of multi-channel organization.
Yeah, great. I want to make sure we take questions too at some point. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll figure out how to get a mic to you. Any questions now? I'll just go to the next question. So location, big theme. We just heard it again from Contagion and Grindr. And, you just mentioned Place. Jason mentioned it yesterday. Groupon, Factual. I mean, everyone seems to be saying that location is the next. Messaging. Eyal, you just took a shot at messaging during your presentation, I noticed, and you were actually trying to reveal something in 5 minutes. It's incredibly complex of your own product. Can you talk about location and where the biggest opportunity really is for the most customers out there?
Well, I think location-based systems offer a huge opportunity for many customers. And obviously, location is context, and context means that you can then personalize the message. You can actually make the message more relevant. It's pretty easy to understand that. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges, and I think, and exactly just like we've spoken about before, for location to be really contextually relevant, you've got to have the big picture altogether, because it's not just the mobile channel that needs to use location measurement or location targeting and send a push message. You actually need to take the location as one of the parameters in this whole plethora of parameters that you can actually put together and use them wisely. Not to irritate the customer, but to actually personalize the message and get to the customer really at the right time with the right message. But then, obviously, apart from the location itself, there's the actual payload of what it is that you're going to be presenting the customer with. And today, just referring to what you said a couple of seconds ago, most of the engagement, so-called, on mobile happen with a message, and that's also not enough. Now, there's another challenge with location, and that's the accuracy of the technology that we're seeing today. And there's obviously a big challenge, and that relates to the battery consumption of the location, let's say, systems and phones. So GPS consumes a lot of battery life. So there's a lot of reliance on cellular data triangulation and Wi-Fi hotspots. And if you actually really come down and measure these, and there's also the context of the people. So for example, there's a difference between a guy that's running near a shop, walking near a shop, or riding a bicycle. And we've been measuring for hundreds, if not thousands of hours, different types of algorithms to actually find the right context, so that we can actually deliver the message to a bicycle rider in a different way than we deliver it to a person who just arrived there by walking.
Yeah, so I wanted to go to the large companies that you're serving. Ariel, are you seeing them recognize the importance of location, and what are the takeaways you're getting recently from all these technologies that you're seeing, the rich context that you can actually take to some of your clients?
To be honest, if I look at the large enterprises and what they've implemented, comparing to what's actually available on the market, system, or what Google can do, what MobileBeat can do, many of them are way behind the curve. Yeah. So there's a lot of catching up to do. So yes, you have store finders. That's about the most thing that you see in location-based, but not much more, to be honest. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of way to go there.
So it's definitely not a technology question, it's just an organizational question and taking advantage of it, right?
Yeah, and I think there is an awareness piece as well, right? I think when we talk, if you were to say location, it's a loaded question, what does that mean? There's many different things that you could do. It's attempting to drive people into store, it's audience-based targeting, right? If you look at, I think there's some interesting things that companies like Place IQ and others are doing where it's an audience story, right? More of a brand story of, hey, you want to reach soccer moms, and it's all based on where you've been. So you can start to deduce based on the types of establishments or the places that you go. That is one element. There's another element of, hey, I'm searching and I'm a mile from a physical location versus 10 miles and bidding differently for that person that's close versus far away to try and get them into store. And then the measurement piece of that. So location is a broad term, and there's a lot of things that you can do. Distilling it down, driving some awareness, but thinking about it and how it impacts your business, I think, is incredibly important.
There's also the technological aspect. We've just seen in the latest phones of Apple, the M7 chip, which actually allows you to distinguish between the various activities that people do in their respective locations. So runners, walkers, exercising, and all that. And I think that's going to be, in the next round of location relevant targeting, if you may call it, or creation of customer journey, a very important piece that will be used in the context of location. So it's also a matter of a little bit of technology.
Yeah.
I mean, at I/O, they talked about the Android car experience, and you're going to have that phone docked essentially in your vehicle. Now you're driving. What is the experience that you give contextually relevant? Are you doing it in that moment? Is it, predicting where you should be 10 miles from now and serving you an ad? It's going to get more complex, and there is a technology gap that does probably exist today.
Any questions for the panel? We just got about a minute and a half left. Quick question. So what about content strategy? It's going to go to a different area. We're just going to go down the list here. Yahoo, I think at last count, had 135 different apps, right? And I think Google had 75 different apps. LinkedIn, I think did they announce their 6th one? But just talking about the need for multiple apps, just representing different types of functionality. Uber has one app and they're doing fine. Thank you very much, right? And Airbnb has this pretty simple strategy, but when you're dealing with larger companies, you've got all kinds of functionality you need to get across. Can you talk a little bit about the lessons learned recently about the content strategy?
I think the main thing is that these app creation processes are not under control. The cost to create an app is not that big for a large enterprise, so everybody has ideas. They can sign off these projects themselves. Even websites. SAP is just doing this. Run simple. So I think they shut down about 250 websites, SAP websites, and nobody even noticed. Yeah. It's really, does it really work? Is it really needed? And how do these things work together? I think many of these apps, people don't even know that they exist. So just having them there and the usability of these and the take-up of these applications are two different things.
I see a lot of examples of clients of ours which are now consolidating app functionality. Because basically the problem is the utility of the app. If the utility is not there, then people basically never use it. And then you have a retention problem, which is hunting most of the apps. I mean, if you see the statistics, they're pretty dismal.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Brendon, do you have your last comment?
No, I was just going to say, I think that there's a meme or a trend that is all about decoupling of apps. Yeah. But I think, it's still too early to tell probably what is the right strategy. So we will see how that plays out. But it is something that we certainly actively do discuss internally.
Okay, well that was our effort at the high level overview of growth on mobile. There's just way too much to unpack there, but thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you.
It was a great conversation. Thanks.
Thank you.